Hi, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to give this presentation here at the CARE 2022 conference. My name is Lars Pedersen, and I'm a professor at the Norwegian School of Economics, where I am co-head of the Center for Sustainable Business, together with my colleague Sveinung Jørgensen, who has been part of developing this presentation, but who is not here with us today. So at the Center for Sustainable Business, we do research on the technologies, behaviors, and business models that promote sustainable business, whether related to business models, consumption, finance, and reporting. And that, of course, reflects the fact that today sustainability and ESG matters are everywhere. And in this presentation, I am going to argue that you cannot spell ESG without I, and I will soon explain what I mean by that. And ESG, of course, is an acronym. It's 3 letters, and in the field of ESG, which is often referred to as an alphabet soup, there are a lot of acronyms. ESG, CSR, SASB, TFCD. You can hear people say sentences like SASB and the IIRC has merged and become the VRF. And this alphabet soup, which is referring to the many different entities, institutions, standards, and so on in the field of corporate sustainability can sometimes be a little bit confusing. And why then am I bothering with putting another letter into the mix? You cannot spell ESG without I. And what on earth do I mean when I say I? Well, what I mean is that ESG, meaning environmental, social, and governance issues, in some sense, cannot be properly understood without taking the letter I, which stands for innovation, seriously. Because behind the improvements in ESG performance that big and small companies, startups, and incumbents are trying to achieve today, behind those improvements are innovation efforts, and more specifically, business model innovation efforts. And what I'm going to argue in this presentation is that for us to properly understand the ESG matters of a company, whether we are users of information of a sustainability report like an investor, questioning whether or not you should invest in a firm. If you are a policymaker or a regulator looking at a company and its footprints from the outside, we do not only want to understand what is the environmental footprint, the social footprint, and the economic footprint of the company. We also want to understand, crucially, we want to understand how does this relate to the fundamental business model of the company, and what changes and innovations are the company trying to make to its business model so as to improve these social, environmental, and economic outcomes. So at the get-go here is really the notion of the business model. The business model, of course, is a phenomenon that stands on its own feet outside sustainability, outside ESG. It's become a real fad in the management literature in recent years to talk about business models and business model innovations. And we see also now in the field of sustainability that the conversation is increasingly being focused on business models and their externalities as the starting point for conversations about sustainability and ESG. And the business model, very simply put, can be referred to as the architecture of how the company creates, delivers, and captures value. So any company, whether for profit or for that matter, companies that are not for profit, have a business model, a model of how they create value for their customers and also for other stakeholders. The value delivery model, which is really about what are the resources that goes into creating this value, what are the activities that are necessary to carry out to create value, and what are the partners that are needed in order for these value creation processes to be successful. And then finally, any business model has a value capture model, which is essentially the logic of profitability. It's the idea of how this particular company creates value and at the end of the day makes money.
Lars, questions have been coming in from the chat wondering why readers of a sustainability report should care about the company's innovation efforts. Isn't it all about the footprints?
Now that is a very good question, Peter. Thank you. And I think it's timely to ask why should, let's say, a user of a sustainability report care about the business model? And let's take a concrete example. If we look at the business model of, for instance, Carlsberg, and we see it here on the screen, this is actually taken from one of the very first pages of Carlsberg's very comprehensive ESG report. And essentially the whole report starts out with an account of what does the basic business model of Carlsberg look like. And then when you continue reading the account of their environmental footprints, for better or worse, their social footprints, for better or worse, and their governance structures that are trying to help them achieve these financial, environmental, and social goals, we see that all of that is really flowing out of this basic account of what the business model of Carlsberg looks like, from sourcing to brewing to distribution to sales and marketing, and of course the consumption of this product, in their case beer, which has some clear upsides, but of course from both environmental and social standpoints also have some very clear downsides. So for interested readers, pick up that report and have a look at how the business model is really, in some sense, the point of departure for their entire presentation about what their footprints look like and what kind of efforts they are putting into trying to improve those footprints. And you can say that this is really nothing new. I mean, for a long time, we've been talking about the business model also in the field of sustainability. And like this Carlsberg case illustrates for us, the business model is even put into the sustainability reports as a starting point. Not all sustainability reports, not at all, but we see this increasingly in sustainability reports of many different kinds of companies, that they start out with talking about the business model. And if we look at some of the key institutions and key players in the field of sustainability measurement, reporting, and also sustainable finance, we will see that this interest in the business model and the innovation of the business model has been present for some time. So, for instance, if we look at the SASB framework, the conceptual framework of SASB, the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board, which I previously in my alphabet soup referred to as having now become part of this new value reporting framework, they have they present or outline 5 dimensions of sustainability that are sort of at the core of how they treat sustainability in their reporting framework. And we see some usual suspects here. We see environment, the E in ESG. We see the S in ESG, the social dimension, but it's really chopped into 2 different dimensions. Human capital, which is about social aspects that are internal to the firm. And then the third one, social capital, which refers to social footprints that are relevant in some sense outside the firm. And then there are 2 final dimensions, leadership and governance being one, which is the G of ESG. But most crucially for this presentation, the 4th point here, business model and innovation, which is one of the 5 dimensions that we see in SASB's conceptual framework. And on the slide here, you see SASB's own description. This is from the conceptual framework document, which I think is from 2017. So it's a few years ago already. And we see how they describe this as being a key part of sustainability because it relates to the impact of sustainability issues on the innovation and business models of company, and specifically on the integration of the environmental, human, and social issues into the value creation process of the company. So if we think back to the business model we saw earlier and the value creation on top of that business model, the question that is asked here is really, well, how are these environmental, social, and human issues integrated into the manner in which the company creates value? So basically into the value proposition of the company. And we see here that several aspects are pointed out, one of them being product innovation, another one being related to impacts on tangible assets, such as the resources that I mentioned as part of the value delivery part of the business model, and also the financial assets of the company that also are influenced by sustainability issues.
Lars, may I interrupt? I have another question from the chat. The question is, why and how is materiality assessment so central for ESG-related innovation?
Yeah, that is a good question, Peter. And this question of materiality really comes up very clearly when we think about this SASB framework, and it's really been one of the important institutions driving the conversation about materiality forward in the field of sustainability. So let's talk a little bit about materiality, because this concept, which of course comes from the fields of accounting and auditing, has really become a key topic of discussion in the field of sustainability in recent years. And when we talk about materiality in the field of sustainability, we're really asking the question, well, what are the material sustainability issues? Meaning, what are the sustainability issues that are important for the firm itself and for the value creating processes of the firm, so the business model of the firm. And then also, what are the sustainability issues that are important for the stakeholders of the firm, those who are outside the firm but that the firm relies on. And in recent years, we've seen a little bit of a tension between two different concepts of materiality in the field of sustainability. On the slide here is a paper that I recently published together with my colleague Sveinung Jørgensen and our finance colleague Aksel Mjøs. We recently published this paper where we discussed the tensions between the two types of materiality, the one perhaps most associated with the GRI framework, where we see that the x-axis refers to the significance of the impacts, the ESG impacts of the company, whereas the other materiality matrix that we see here on the left is perhaps more similar to the SASB mindset, if you will, where the x-axis is referring to which sustainability issues are important for the company. And for both of these two, the y-axis refers to what are the sustainability issues that are important for stakeholders. And of course, whether you assume a sort of impact-oriented or a company-oriented perspective on the x-axis here, you might arrive at some quite different conclusions with regard to which issues are material. And with reference to your question, Peter, why is this important for innovation? Well, when we think about materiality, and we can see this here on the figure from this quite old report now, the materiality report by Forstater and colleagues from 2005, where they really make this argument when we talk about materiality in sustainable business contexts, we are really taking the whole path from strategy to reporting and back, meaning that materiality helps us identify material sustainability issues. It helps us prioritize them, because if we think back to the materiality matrix, we want to understand what are the highly material issues, those that will be high up to the right corner of the materiality matrix. So from a strategy perspective and also an innovation perspective, that process of materiality helps us sort out and prioritize between what are the sustainability issues that this company really have to deal with, and what are the sustainability issues that are perhaps slightly less important and that can be monitored, but we don't have to put all efforts in to solve them right now. And that, of course, will trickle down to the right side of this picture, which is about measurement and reporting, because you also, of course, want to have good numbers and good insight into the most material issues, those issues that will be most important to provide insight to an investor or to other users of information, and that also for internal decision-making purposes in the firm are important, because the companies are, of course, also measuring these footprints so that they can track their own progress in trying to improve on them. So there's a very clear link here from strategy and innovation as it relates to sustainability issues on the one hand, and then the measurement and reporting both for internal purposes and external purposes of those footprints over time. So materiality here really plays a key role in the identification, prioritization, management, measurement, and reporting of sustainability issues. So I want to use one example just to illustrate the complexity from an innovation standpoint that lies behind any number that you will find in an ESG report. You want to look at the numbers in an ESG report and believe that they are telling you something important about the footprints, yes, the magnitude of the footprints, yes, for better or worse, but also the progress for the company over time in managing those problems and addressing and improving on the given sustainability issue, whether that is waste management or avoiding human rights violations or improving biodiversity outcomes or whatever kind of number you're looking for or issue you're looking for in an ESG report. And I'm going to share a case with you here that we have worked with our research team for many years. For the last 4 or 5 years, we've been working very closely with a Norwegian fast-moving consumer goods company, Orkla. It's the biggest consumer goods company in Norway, and they operate across all consumer goods. And they've had a really big effort related to what we see on the picture here, plastic pollution. Consumer goods such as soaps and food products and so on have a lot of plastic packaging. And if you go to the Orkla ESG report, which is very comprehensive, you can find a table like the one we're looking at here. This is from the 2021 report, and it gives you a couple of numbers. And they, of course, give you an indication of what is going on within the given year, and also if you go across the columns from year to year. But what this isn't telling you is all the innovation that is happening in the background with regard to the business model itself. And in this project that we've had going on with Orkla over 4 years now, we've been trying to look at what might be business model innovations that can drastically reduce plastic footprints over time. And together with the company, at the same time that they were doing incremental things, starting to introduce recyclable plastic, trying to work with waste management firms to bring the plastic back and ensure that it doesn't end up in the oceans and so on, we've had, as this picture shows, business model experiments along many dimensions. We've tried to work with big bags in the home where you can refill the same packaging again and again. We've tested refill stations in the store to see if people are willing to go to the store and refill on their old plastic bottles. We've had home delivery of soap to customers who use an app to get refills returned to their home. And we've even worked with cleaning companies who come home to the homes of customers and refill their soap while they're there so that no new plastic packaging is needed. At the end of last year, Orkla really took a large step ahead when they launched a new venture inside the company, a company called Påfyll, which is Norwegian for the word refill. And it is a company that has made generic refill packaging that can be purchased on a subscription basis so that it's delivered to your home, refilled, and thereby making it unnecessary to have single-use packaging at all. And this will remind you of similar ventures in other countries. And I give some detail on this research project, not for the sake of soap or for the sake of Orkla, but to shed some light on the big innovation efforts that lie behind the dry and simple numbers that we see in the ESG report. And what I'm arguing is that if we don't see and if we don't get information about these business model innovations that are happening in the background, it is insufficient in a way in order to understand, well, what is the likely progress being made over time with this company? Are they only making incremental small steps, or can we hope that these efforts over time will lead to more comprehensive effects on, in this case, the plastic footprint, that perhaps can make the numbers that we saw in the table earlier much, much lower than they are today. Now, the critical sustainability reporting scholar might argue that this is way too much to put into a report. This is hard to quantify, and perhaps this is the kind of information that needs to be and needs to remain a little bit more on the qualitative side in an ESG report if you are to provide information on these kinds of matters. But I'm arguing here that if we look at all the sustainability improvements that firms are doing, many of them are incremental, and perhaps they can make some incremental progress for a period of time, but then at some point they hit the reality of their business model that is not fundamentally being changed, and thereby it becomes harder and harder to improve the footprints. And this case that I'm telling you about here is an illustration to show how, in the background, companies need to ask themselves, are there fundamental changes we need to make to our business model so as to make them more sustainable, and how can we inform users of our ESG information about these efforts that are going on in the background so that they can properly assess our efforts to become more sustainable while remaining, hopefully, just as profitable or perhaps even more profitable in the future. So to wrap up, ESG and I. We are arguing here that improving ESG performance more than incrementally very often will require business model innovation. So in order for ESG to improve, we need the I. Therefore, ESG work crucially needs to be tied to business models, and the measurement and reporting of ESG should also provide insight into this kind of business model innovation going on in the background. And I've argued that materiality is crucial for tying together ESG and I, to move from strategy and innovation on the one hand to measurement and reporting on the other hand, in a manner that can allow companies to align their sustainability performance, their ESG performance on the one hand, and their financial performance on the other hand. Thank you very much for your attention.